Hello, everyone. This is Pastor Alan Hathaway. I'm glad you joined me for this particular series of messages. I'm starting a new series leading up to the Easter season, and I'm calling it If Christ is Not Risen. And it's based in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 14, where the Apostle Paul says, "And if Christ be not risen, then our preaching is vain, and your faith is also vain." I thought about that and how powerful and important the resurrection is in our lives. So over these next few weeks, I'm going to be speaking on different aspects of the resurrection and what it means in our lives. Some of the themes I'm going to be talking about are an anchor in the midst of our doubts, which will be this particular Sunday. I'll also be talking about hope in hopeless situations. I'll be talking about how we recognize God's power at work within us because of the resurrection. And then I'll be talking a little bit about a fuller understanding of the meaning of salvation because of the resurrection. And then the resurrection helps us understand who Jesus really is. And that is very important for us as Christians. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the purpose on Palm Sunday, particularly about what the purpose of Christ's suffering is. And then on Resurrection Sunday, I want to talk to you about the goal God has for all of his creation. And it's tied up with the resurrection. So those are some interesting themes that I'm going to be exploring. One of the powerful things about the resurrection is that it developed within the Jewish faith. The Jewish faith alone, among all the ancient religions of the world, believed in this concept of the resurrection. It is unique to Judaism and has come into the Christian faith from its Jewish roots. And so we are beholding to the Jewish people for the belief in the resurrection. For the Greek people and for other people around the Jewish people, they struggled with the idea of the resurrection. To them, it was a reanimation of a dead body, and they found that kind of creepy. But in truth, it meant something quite different. It meant God transforming our bodies and reuniting our spirits with our bodies in a way that is unique in all of ancient religions. It's a very special idea. And for us as Christians, we need to understand how important this is. Jesus Christ embodies the resurrection for us, and it speaks to us of his divinity and is actually the proof of his divinity. If you look throughout scriptures, it talks about his raising from the dead as being the proof of his divine nature. This particular sermon, I want to talk to you a little bit about a confidence in a crisis of faith. One of the most powerful stories in the Bible to me is found in Genesis chapter 22. It is the sacrifice of Isaac, as it's termed, but really it should be called the intervention of God. God has tested Abraham. It tells us at the very beginning of Genesis 22 that God is testing Abraham, and he asks him to sacrifice Isaac, the promised son. And so Abraham immediately goes with his son and two servants toward Mount Moriah, which was a long, long trip. It was several days' journey from where Abraham was living at the time. And so they went on this journey, and when they saw Mount Moriah in the distance, Abraham told the young servants that he and Isaac would go and worship and then come back. It's an interesting statement. As if you follow the story on out in Genesis chapter 22, Abraham takes Isaac up, and Isaac asks him, Dad, where's the sacrifice? We've got the fire, we've got the wood. I'm carrying the wood. Where's the sacrifice? And Abraham says to him, God will provide. And we often focus in on that concept of God will provide. And then when he gets to Mount Moriah, Abraham builds an altar and lays out the wood and binds his son Isaac and prepares to cut his throat. And God stops him. And there is a ram caught in the thicket. And God says, sacrifice the ram. I now know that you honor me and respect me more than anything else. And that is a powerful statement about Abraham's faith. But what gave Abraham the ability to go that direction? Abraham had a lot of questions, just like we would. And there are moments when our faith is tested, when we are struggling with why God would do that or why God does this. And I have had those moments of crisis in my own faith. It's not generally when I'm going through a really bad experience in my life, but it's more when I'm witnessing someone else's experience or some terrible event in the world, and I'm trying to make sense out of it. Or if God has asked me to do something I really don't want to do in life. And I question God's purpose, especially when it makes absolutely no sense to me. Those are the things that push us to the edge of our faith. And Abraham was pushed to the edge of his faith. The writer of Hebrews gives us the reason why Abraham could make this stand in his life. And I don't know what I would do if God asked me to do what he asked Abraham to do. But I do know that there is a moment in Abraham's life when he makes a statement of faith, and the writer of Hebrews picks up on that in a way that no other writer in the Bible does. He says in chapter 11, verse 17, by faith Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac, and he who had received the promises was in the act of offering up his only son, of whom it was said, through Isaac shall your offspring be named. He considered that God was able even to raise him up from the dead, from which, figuratively speaking, he did receive him back. In verse 19, the writer of Hebrews is actually referencing back to Genesis 22, verse 5, where Abraham says to the young men that have traveled with he and Isaac, we will go and worship, and the boy and I will come back. So the point is that, as the writer of Hebrews picked up on, is an expression of faith. Faith that God would somehow provide in the midst of that circumstance, that test of faith, that God's character was solid and Abraham would trust in that character. The writer of Hebrews indicates that trust was even to the point of the resurrection, meaning the concept of the resurrection is central to us going through those moments of great doubt in our lives. It is our ability to believe that God is going to set everything right. And that's what the resurrection is about, is that God will set all things right in the world. And when we trust in that, we can go through those dark times. We can understand that God has his hand in the middle of it. And though we do not understand why it's happening or exactly what God's purpose is, we do understand that God, because of the resurrection, will bring all things right. The resurrection becomes an anchor, as it were. And the writer of Hebrews would talk about that faith being an anchor to the soul. And the concept of the resurrection lies at the very base of that anchor. It holds us steady in those difficult moments And in those moments when we doubt, and we all as Christians face some moments of doubt, but we also understand that that resurrection promise holds true. It holds true even more so since Jesus Christ came and was the firstborn of the resurrection. And so we enjoy and celebrate the grace of God in Christ Jesus and the promise he gives us in Christ. I hope you're having a wonderful day. I hope to see you in church. Take care, and God bless.